If you're planning your wedding and currently drowning in to-do lists, spreadsheets, Notion templates, your saved Instagram folder, and hundreds of tiny decisions that somehow all feel urgent, and underneath all of that, you feel guilty for not having the time of your life, I have something to tell you. It is completely okay to hate this process. And I know it sounds strange to say out loud because your bride era is supposed to be this beautiful, glowing, once in a lifetime season. You are supposed to be excited, you are supposed to be grateful, you're supposed to be organized but effortless, have opinion but not too much to be difficult, emotional but not too emotional, clear about what you want but still flexible enough to make everyone feel included. And maybe you do want the wedding, maybe you are excited to marry your person, maybe you have waited for this, and there are moments where you feel joy underneath it all, but you're also tired, you're overwhelmed, you're making decisions every single week that somehow don't feel like decisions anymore. They feel like tiny tests. What kind of bride are you? What kind of daughter are you? What kind of woman are you? What do you value? What do you deserve? What are you allowed to want? And that is what I want to talk about today. Why wedding planning can feel so heavy even when you love the person you're marrying. Why choosing flowers can suddenly feel like choosing an identity. Why spending money on yourself can feel like moral failure. And one request from your family can feel like, because I think one of the loneliest part of wedding planning is that everyone keeps telling you how happy you should be. And sometimes you are happy, but sometimes you're also anxious. Sometimes you're resentful. A lot of the time you're snappy. Sometimes you cry over something that looks small from the outside. Guest list, a dress fitting, budget conversation, comments from your mom, vendor who hasn't replied, question that begins with, what are you doing about? And before the person even finished the sentence, your body just feels tired. Then comes the second feeling, which is the guilt about the feeling. Because now you're not only overwhelmed, you are judging yourself for being overwhelmed. You start thinking, why am I like this? Why am I not enjoying this more? Why is this so hard for me? Does this mean I'm ungrateful? Does this mean I'm not ready? Does this mean something is wrong with us? I had so many versions of that thought. And I think for me, the hardest part was that I could not separate the wedding and everything else that the wedding was touching. The wedding planning didn't feel like one project. It felt like someone had taken all of the tender part of my life and put them all together on the same table. My anxiety, my people pleasing, my relationship with money, my fear of getting things wrong, my fear of being misunderstood, my desire to feel like the wedding is mine, and also my fear of what it would mean if I actually let it be mine. That is a lot for one spreadsheet to hold. And I think sometimes we just call it wedding stress because that sounds simpler. It sounds cleaner. Like, oh, I'm just stressed because there are a lot of moving parts. Yes, there are a lot of logistics. There are so many moving parts. But sometimes the logistics are just a doorway. You open it and thinking that you're going to talk about flowers, and suddenly you're just standing in the middle of your childhood. For me, one of the biggest things that wedding planning has exposed was my people pleasing. And not in a cute way, not in, I just want everybody to be happy. It's in a way where I realized how much of my life had been shaped by trying to become the version of myself that would cause the least disappointment, the least discomfort, the least conflict. Growing up, I had so many moments where I feel like I couldn't do the things that I really want to do because I had to be something else for my family. Someone more mature, someone more understanding, someone wise for her age, someone who could read the room, someone who could make peace before anyone ever admit that there was tension. And I want to talk about this very carefully because I do believe a lot of it comes from good intention. I believe love was there. I believe sacrifice was there. Sometimes love, when it doesn't know how to ask directly, start to feels like pressure. Sometimes care, when it's mixed with fear, start to feel like control. Sometimes a request is not just a request because your body remember all the other times when you said yes, when all you want to say was no. So when wedding planning started and certain requests came in from my family, I was not only hearing the requests, I was hearing an old role calling me back. The easy daughter, the understanding sister, the person who make it work, the daughter who does not make things harder, the daughter who know how to behave herself so everyone can feel okay. And something in me reacts so strongly, sometimes too strong. There were moments where my response was not just, I don't want that for the wedding. It was more like, you are not doing this to me again. I do not say that proudly. I say that honestly. Because sometimes when you have spent years swallowing discomfort, the first time you try to stop it, it's not always going to come out beautifully. It comes out sharp. It comes out messy. It comes out with all the volume of things you've never said. I was learning to stop my people-pleasing tendency, but I was learning it in real time. I was learning how to express myself without exploding. I was learning how to say no without making it into a war. I was learning how to stop abandoning myself without punishing other people for all the years I had abandoned myself quietly. And that is not easy. Because if you grew up being praised for being mature, being understanding, being the one who gets it, authenticity can feel rude at first. Wanting something can feel inconvenient. A boundary can feel like betrayal. You are not just saying, I prefer this color palette. You are saying, I'm willing to let you be disappointed and still not change my mind. And for some of us, that is terrifying. There's this psychology idea called affect labeling. It basically means putting feelings into words, which I was terrible at. Sometimes the monster gets smaller when you finally call it by name. So maybe instead of saying I'm being dramatic, I could say I am feeling controlled, or I'm scared of disappointing my family, or I'm reacting to an old wound, or I feel angry because I don't know how to ask for what I want without feeling guilty. The naming did not fix everything, of course. I still had to have the conversation. I still had to make the decisions. I still had to sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood. But naming it gave the feeling somewhere to go. It gave me a little space between the request and my reaction. Sometimes that space is when the adult version of you can finally enter the room, because there is a difference between reacting from the wound and responding from the woman you're becoming. I think wedding planning had showed me how thin that line can be. Another thing I didn't expect my wedding planning to expose was my relationship with money. I do not just mean budget or deciding where to splurge and where to save. I mean the emotional inheritance of money. If you're a firstborn daughter, or you're a first-generation immigrant, or you grew up in an Asian household, or somehow you're all of the above, like me, maybe you know the feeling. The feeling that money isn't just money. Money is sacrifice. Money is your parent working hard. Money is watching them save, watching them say no to themselves, watching them put their dreams on hold, watching desire become something practical that people learn to live without. So when it's finally time to want something beautiful for myself, it does not always feel easy or beautiful. Sometimes it feels sinful. Sometimes it feels excessive. A lot of the time it feels selfish. Sometimes it feels like I'm betraying the version of myself that learned to be careful with money. That was hard for me because I wanted beautiful things. I had preference, I had taste, I had a vision. But every time I wanted something, another part of me would immediately start negotiating against myself. Do you really need that? Is that too much? Is that wasteful? What will people think? What will my parents think? Are you being spoiled? Are you being irresponsible? Are you forgetting where you come from? So I was making financial decision for my wedding while also talking myself out of my own desire. Every single week, there was another decision that required me to either honor what I really wanted or talk myself out of it again. And at some point, that just get exhausting because it is one thing to budget. It is another thing to have to emotionally defend yourself every time you make a choice. I want to be clear. I'm not saying spend the money that you don't have. I'm not saying ignore your budget. I'm not saying everyone's need to become a purchase. That is not what I mean. I mean, there is a difference between making a grounded financial decision and shrinking yourself because wanting something makes you uncomfortable. There's a difference between saying this does not feel aligned with our priorities and saying who am I to have priorities? There's a difference between saying this is not worth the money for me and saying I'm not worth spending the money on. And that difference matters. For a while, I don't know which one I was doing. I thought I was being responsible. And sometimes I was, but sometimes I was afraid of being seen as a person with desire. That whole sentence became really important for me because desire is vulnerable. It is vulnerable to say, I want this. Vulnerable to have a preference. It can be vulnerable to choose something that can be judged. It's kind of vulnerable to put a piece of yourself into a room and let people walk into it. At some point, a dress is not just a dress. The flowers are not just flowers. Everything starts to feel like evidence. Evidence of your taste, your value, your class, your family, your femininity, your worth. And that is an impossible amount of meanings to put on napkin colors. But somehow there you are at midnight looking at different napkins color, feeling like one of them saying something about your soul. I smile, but only because it is true. I had moments where I would check Instagram, then Pinterest, then AI, then ask for a second opinions from someone, then second guess the option that I sent, wonder if I have made the wrong decision before I had even made the decision. I told myself I was looking for inspiration, but I think a lot of the time I was looking for permission to trust my taste, permission to stop researching, permission to choose, permission to let something be good enough and to want what I wanted without proving that it was objectively the best possible choice. There's a famous study about choice overload where people were more likely to buy when they're offered a smaller selection than when they were offered a bigger selection. The bigger display attract more attention, but the smaller display led to more actual decisions. More options can feel exciting at first, but they can also make it super hard to choose. I thought about that so many times during the wedding planning because wedding planning gives you endless option, endless aesthetic, endless tradition, endless opinions, endless example of how someone else did it better, cleaner, prettier, cooler, more sentimental, more timeless, more unique. And then you're somehow are supposed to locate yourself in all of that. I think that is when decision fatigue becomes identity fatigue. You are not just tired of choosing, you are tired of where every single choice seems to ask of you. Who are you? Are you sure? Are you sure enough to stand behind it? That question followed me into my relationship relationship too, because there were moments where the exhaustion of it all made me lose sight of the joy. And I felt so guilty for that. I thought I was supposed to be super in love, super happy, over the moon, super bridal, whatever that means. I thought being in love would naturally make me excited, soft, grateful for every conversation about timelines, vendors, and invoices. But then we would fight, or we would get tired, or one of us would be overwhelmed, or we would have the same conversation again and again and again. I would think, why is this so hard? Why are we fighting this much? Shouldn't this be easier? Shouldn't love make this easier? There's this one sentence that I had to stop myself from saying. You might have your own version of it. The sentence was, if planning a wedding is causing us to fight this much, I don't know if this is worth it anymore. And when I say that, I want to be very tender, because sometimes conflict does reveal something important. Sometimes stress gives you information. Sometimes your body knows things that your mind is trying to rationalize the way. And I would never tell you to ignore that. But in my case, that sentence was the farthest away from my truth. That sentence was exhaustion looking for an exit. It was my nervous system trying to escape the noise. It wasn't saying I do not love this person. It was saying I'm so tired of feeling like every conversation turns into another thing that we have to survive. That distinction mattered, because if I believe every single thought that I had when I am exhausted, I would have confused depletion for clarity. There are sentences that came from inner wisdom, and there are sentences that came from needing a nap, a meal, a pause, a hug, a reset, a conversation that does not happen at 3 a.m. over a shared spreadsheet. And I had to learn that not every hard feeling needed to become a verdict. Not every conflict needed to become a prophecy. Not every overwhelmed thoughts needed to be the truth about the relationship. Most of the time, the love was there. I just couldn't hear it over the noise. And I think this is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this episode, because if you're planning a wedding and you secretly hate parts of it, you might start judging your love through the mood of the process. You might think, if I really love him, I would enjoy this more. If this relationship were right, this would not feel so hard. If I were a better bride, I would be glowing. If I were more grateful, I wouldn't cry over small things. But loving someone does not automatically gives you the capacity for the giant logistical nightmare that is wedding. Loving someone does not erase your family dynamic. Loving someone does not heal your relationship with money overnight. Loving someone does not make you immune to decision fatigue. Loving someone does not mean you suddenly become comfortable disappointing people. And maybe that is obvious when I say it like that, but when you're inside of it, it is not that obvious. Where you're inside it, everything touches everything. The fight about budgets become a fight about your values. The fight about guest lists become a fight about your family. The fight about timelines becomes a fight about effort. The fight about one decision becomes a fight about whether you are being seen or heard, whether you're alone in this. So no, I don't think hating parts of wedding planning automatically means something is wrong with your relationship. Sometimes it means the process is asking too much out of two people who are also trying to love each other well. And that brings me to the guilt, because underneath so much of this was guilt. Guilt that I wasn't enjoying it enough, guilt that I wanted things, guilt that I was spending money, guilt that I was disappointing people, or I was overwhelmed, that I couldn't make everybody happy and still feel like myself. And then under that guilt, there was shame, which is slightly different. A simple way psychologists explain it is that guilt is more about the behavior. For example, I did something wrong, or I I need to repair something. And shame is more about the self. I am wrong. I should hide. I am the problem. Sometimes guilt was useful. Sometimes tell me, oh, I was too sharp. Go repair that. Or you said that from a reactive place. Go back and clean it up. Or this conversation matters. Don't avoid it. But other times, what I was calling guilt was actually shame. It wasn't saying you violated a value. It was saying, how dare you want anything? How dare you want nicer things? How dare you ask for what feels beautiful for you? How dare you disappoint your family? How dare you be difficult? How dare you be a woman with a vision? And that is when I start asking myself, did I actually violate a value? Or am I just uncomfortable being seen as someone with desire? Did I actually hurt someone? Or did I just stop performing the version of myself that they get used to? Did I make a careless decision? Or did I make a decision that someone else wouldn't have chosen for me? Did I betray my values? Or did I betray the old role that kept me safe? Those questions were not always easy to answer. A lot of the times the answers were uncomfortable. Sometimes I did need to repair. Sometimes I did need to apologize. Sometimes I did need to slow down and ask myself if I'm acting out of fear. But sometimes the answer was simply no, I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted something, and wanting still feel unfamiliar in my body. That is the part that I kept coming back to, because we talk so much about wedding planning is a season of choosing your venue, choosing your dress, choosing your flowers, choosing your menu, but no one really tells you that choosing requires a self you trust, a self you are willing to be seen with, a self that you're willing to be misunderstood. If you have spent years becoming who other people needed you to be, choosing can feel like exposure, because now there's no one to hide behind. You cannot say, I only do this because they wanted it, or I don't care, or whatever is the easiest. At some point, the process asks, what do you want? That question sounds so simple until you realize how long you have been trained to answer it with other people in mind. What do I want that will not upset anyone? What do I want that will not look excessive? What do I want that still make me a good family, a good partner, a good woman? And maybe that is why the process can make you feel like you have to be the perfect version of yourself. Because the perfect bride would know. She would be calm, she would be graceful, she would be decisive, she would have beautiful taste but not care too much, she would have boundaries but never hurts anyone's feelings, she would be financially responsible but are able to create magic, she would make her partner feel loved, her family feel included, her guests feel considered, herself feels represented, and she would do all of this looking well rested. I do not know who invented her. I would love to be her if it's possible, but I do not think she is real. I think she's a collage, a little bit of social media, a little bit of family expectation, a little bit of cultural pressure, a little bit of capitalism, a little bit of gender roles, a lot of our own little fear, and somehow we mistake her for a standard. Honestly, I think trying to become her will take you farther away from yourself. So maybe the work is not becoming the perfect bride. Maybe the work is becoming honest enough to notice when you are performing, honest enough to notice when you're people pleasing, honest enough to notice when your no is actually fear, or honest enough to notice when your yes is actually self-abandonment. And I say this gently because I'm not saying all of this from the other side as someone who have mastered all of this. I did not. I am still learning. I still have moments when I want approval before I trust myself. I still have moments where I mistake peace with everyone being pleased. And maybe that is why this episode matters to me, because I don't want to pretend that wedding planning was just this cute season of picking pretty things was confronting. It showed me where I still needed permission, where I still wanted to be chosen by everyone before I chose myself. It showed me where I was afraid of being judged. It showed me how quickly I become small when money was involved. It showed me how much grief lives inside the act of becoming your own person, because that is part of it too. Sometimes when you choose yourself, you grieve the younger version of you who learned to be good by being convenient. You grieve the moments where you make yourself smaller and call it love. You grieve the dreams your parent put down. You grieve the fact that wanting more can feel like a betrayal when you come from people who survive with less. And I think it's okay to hold that grief with tenderness. You don't have to turn your family into villain to admit that something hurt. You don't have to reject where you come from to choose where you're going. There can be gratitude and anger, love and distance, respect and boundaries, all in the same body. And maybe that is the part that feel like marriage the most to me, because marriage is not just about choosing someone when everything feels romantic. It's choosing honesty when avoidance would be easier. It is choosing repair when you say the thing badly. It is choosing to notice when the fight is not really about what's in front of you. It is choosing to ask yourself, what old fear just entered this conversation? What am I defending right now? My preference, my ego, my childhood, my need to be seen, my need to be safe? Wedding planning gives me a lot of opportunity to ask those questions. Not always gracefully, sometimes after a fight, sometimes after a lot of tears, sometimes after I had made the conversation harder than I needed it to be. But even then, there was something to learn, because repair is not only for the moment when you behave perfectly. Repair exists because we do not. Maybe that is another kind of permission to be in a beautiful season and still have hard days, permission to be grateful but still feel overwhelmed, permission to want something and still be responsible, permission to set a boundary and still be loving, permission to disappoint someone and still be good. Because I do not think your wedding needs the perfect version of you. I think your marriage needs the truthful one, the one who can say, I am scared, the one who can say, I want this and I feel guilty for wanting this, the one who can say, I need a minute before I turn this feeling into something I cannot take back. So if you're in the middle of planning right now and you're not having the time of your life, I hope you can take a deep breath. I hope you can stop making that mean something terrible about you. And I hope you can stop turning exhaustion into evidence against your relationship. I hope you can stop calling yourself ungrateful for having a human reaction to a deeply emotional, expensive, public, family-centered, identity-heavy process. Of course it feels hard. Of course it does. You're not just planning an event. You're making choices in front of people. You're negotiating desire and duty. You're trying to honor love without abandoning yourself. You're trying to be a wife while still being a daughter. You're trying to build something beautiful with another person while carrying everything you learned before they even met you. That is not small. That is not silly. That is not just wedding stress. So maybe next time the guilt comes up, you can ask yourself, did I actually violate a value, or am I just uncomfortable being truly seen? You can ask, am I responding to what is happening now, or am I responding to what this reminds me of? Maybe next time you and your partner are fighting over something that feels too small to hold this much emotion, you can ask, what is this really touching? And maybe the next time you tell yourself you hate the process, you can let that be true without turning it into a crisis. You can love the person, you can want the marriage, you can be grateful for the wedding, and you can still say, this is hard, because it is. And saying that out loud might be the first honest thing that you can do for yourself. I don't know if wedding planning transformed everyone. I don't know if every season has to be a lesson. Sometimes hard things are just hard. Sometimes a seating chart is just annoying. Sometimes a budget conversation is just stressful. And a lot of times you really just need to close your laptop and go to sleep. But I do think there are moments in the wedding planning where something deep peeked through. A pattern, a fear, a younger version of you, an old wound, a new desire. And if you can meet that part of yourself with a little less shame, maybe the process doesn't have to make you perfect. Maybe it can make you more honest. And maybe, just maybe, honest is enough. Maybe honest is more than enough. Because the wedding is one day, but the way you learn to choose yourself, the way you learn to repair, the way you learn to name what is happening, the way you learn to want something without apologizing for existing, that comes with you into the marriage, into the home, into the life that you're building after everyone goes home and the flowers are gone and the dress is packed away and the spreadsheets finally close. Just maybe that is the quiet gift hidden in the process. Not that it was easy, not that you have to love every single second, not that you become this perfect bride, wife person, but that somehow inside all of it, you became a little more yours. And that is worth paying attention to. Thank you so much for checking in. I'll talk to you again next week.